define the sound of a city?
It's still a mystery to me how certain geographical locations end up having a certain type of sound, you know, like Seattle had a grunge sound, there's supposedly a Tempe sound.
To me, there are two major sounds that I feel were created here. One is the twang. Down, that echoey, that very spacey, airy sound.
Or the music scene that puts that sound on the map.
It was a robust scene, you know. We played during the week to crowded bars and people came out, you know. And we will watch the past implode.
There's some great stuff that's going on here in the present that we don't have any connection to whatsoever. And that's great. That's when I probably feel the most proud, is that, hey, there's a lot of great stuff happening here. Cross-cultural, different genres, different styles.
Arizona has always had an independent spirit, so it makes sense that the roots of Arizona's music scene are a reflection of that freedom.
While you may see much of Arizona's desert as dry dirt, it's really a rich soil that for decades has helped grow and cultivate crops of musical talent.
To most people who have moved here from elsewhere, they're surprised when they find out that there was a musical history here.
Better believe it, I've been sleeping at the hotel defeated.
But it's not just the musicians who put their bands on the map.
I've got every contract from every show I did up.
Concert promoters get them touring. DJs get their songs rotating on the radio, and photographers help create an image.
I was Bruce Springsteen's photographer for 10 years.
There is no such thing as an overnight success. It all starts with a seed planted when they were kids.
We started playing with my dad when we were really young. My dad was a mariachi.
Then nurtured and encouraged to grow.
My grandma said, you're always going to be somebody. She said, oh, you're going to be somebody.
Some choose to thrive in their own backyard, while others branch out.
And spreading that kind of punky desert sound.
But always bring along a piece of Arizona as they hit the highway.
Most people have no idea that, Rebel Rouser was done here, and that twangy sound was actually created here in Phoenix.
It made waves across the country and around the world and put local artists on the map in the 1950s, way before the Tempe sound skyrocketed local artists to international stardom.
Down, that echoey, that very spacey, airy sound.
John P. Dixon, better known as Johnny D, is the voice of Arizona's musical history.
It's unofficial. I'm not quite, I'm waiting for Ducey to write the paper and do a nice flowery plaque I can put on the wall.
For nearly 5 decades, he was a DJ on various Phoenix radio stations and is practically a spokesman for the Phoenix sound.
To most people who have moved here from elsewhere, they're surprised when they find out that there was a musical history here. To me, there are two major sounds that I feel were created here. One is the twang. It was never heard before. It was a brand new thing at its time, and suddenly this echoey, very deep, rich guitar sound that was created using an empty water tank to run the sound around in and then feed it back into the tape. That was something that was created here in 1958 that no one had heard before. They're making international gold records here in Phoenix, Arizona that were heard around the world. And then I'd say number two, in the 80s, the JFA Placebo, the punk sound, of these guys skateboarding in empty swimming pools and taking their music and their lifestyle across the country in a bus and spreading that kind of punky desert sound. George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, a lot of people credit hearing Rebel Rouser and saying, I want to pick up a guitar. And that's pretty wild to think of, that that little sound was created right on the corner of Weldon and 7th Street in this little dinky studio.
It's more than sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but the Zubia brothers admit they've touched on all those bullet points. Mark and Lawrence Zubia have been part of the Valley's music scene for more than 2 decades.
Better believe it, I've been sleeping at the hotel defeated. I've been living, but I'm barely breathing. It's the end.
From my perspective, it was Mill Avenue, and to play on Mill Avenue and to play in those bars, Long Wong's, Gibson's, Balboa Cafe, Electric Ballroom, all those places. We aspired to play in all those places with, you know, the bands that we looked up to at the time. It was a robust scene, you know. We played during the week to crowded bars and people came out, you know. Now it seems like there's a music scene throughout the entire valley, mainly in downtown Phoenix. Back in the 90s, it seemed like there was 4 or 5 bands that would pull a crowd. Now, it just seems like it's so lush with talent. It's still a mystery to me how certain geographical locations end up having a certain type of sound, you know, like Seattle had a grunge sound. There's supposedly a Tempe sound. Zubia Brothers are, we started playing with my dad when we were really young. My dad was a mariachi. His name is Raul Zubia. We grew up going to his rehearsals, going to his gigs, and just watching them develop their group and their talent, and eventually grew up to play with those guys. Mariachi music is really acoustic music. You don't plug into an amp, you don't plug in at all. You just play acoustic music. That has, I think, helped Mark and myself considerably play like this in an acoustic format. It's really just guitar and vocal, you know.
I don't know if you hear, I will call it anyway.
We all grew up around AM radio and in the early 70s, and if there's any sort of homogenous vibe going on, I think it's really the fact that we all grew up in this little corner of the world listening to the same radio and developing our songwriting and playing skills. I do think there's a resurgence of singer-songwriter type performance, definitely, yeah. The formula that we use is really just the simple formula that was created in the 50s. You know, it's an intro, verse, chorus, a lead, a bridge, a chorus out sort of song formula. And I think that formula is going to work forever.
Arizona Highways Television is brought to you by Arizona Public Service and the Arizona Office of Tourism.
Roscoe Taylor, or simply Roscoe, is probably the most well-known R&B singer in Phoenix.
Played the O'Shea New, the Rhythm Room, the Blue Note, Eagles Club, Hurricane Bar and Grill, the Raymond Sky on 83rd Avenue in Bell. I played there for 6 years. The Old Tavern in Scottsdale. We played out there for 4 years. The Lounge right down the street. Quite a few places. I've been busy.
Like a lot of artists, he got his musical start in church.
Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. It's a great big church on your south side.
But now it's here at the Womack in Central Phoenix, where the faithful flock to see Roscoe, not on Sunday, but on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
My grandma and my mom was my biggest supporters. They always pushed me. My grandma said, "You're always going to be somebody." She said, "Oh, you're going to be somebody." And my mom used to love to sing. So I used to mimic my mom all the time, follow around and sing and dance. And she played tambourine. I learned how to play the tambourine, and it just kept on going. I'm really a drummer, but everybody made me get off the drums and start singing. I like to hide behind the cymbal and sing. I don't like nobody to see me sing. Once I got out front, never looked back. You never quit. You always gotta have music. Because that's how I get rid of my, as they say, they're demons. When you got demons, it's nothing like going to a club or a church and stand on the side of the street, sing a song, and it just picks you up, gets rid of all those demons. I don't have a lot of money, but this is my way of always giving something back. When I started the two-piece band, they all laughed at me. I decided I'm gonna go to a piano bar. Oh, I was criticized. Nobody's gonna come see you. Lo and behold, 2 years later, it was standing room only and lined up around the door, and it's been like that ever since. Everybody's laughing now. Just come join me, go with the ride, right? Guarantee you won't want to get off.
Put your hands together. Thank you so much.
This is all stuff that's been collected over, some of it as long as 40 years ago, but over that time of promoting concerts all over the country.
Putting on a show is more than a band just showing up. Promotion is key to bringing their music to the masses and giving an audience an experience they'll never forget.
I have 9 places that I store stuff. I wish I had one giant one. Every piece represents a moment in time that I was there for.
Legendary concert promoter Danny Zalesko is as much a part of the Arizona musical fabric as the musicians themselves.
Some of the groups obviously mean more to me than others, you know, things associated with a lot of people's favorite bands, The Dead or Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, and so many other bands. I mean, those are some of the big names, but there's a lot of other names of people who are equally, if not even cooler in some regards. It's really a part of this community. You know, I mean, all this stuff took place more or less in Phoenix. This is Destiny's Child. It's Beyonce, when they first started, it was a Pink Floyd thing signed by Roger Waters.
But what really became the genesis of this? You said that you started collecting baseball memorabilia when you were a kid because you love baseball. I mean, clearly you love music, rock and roll.
When the Beatles came out, just like every other band I've ever promoted, like The Police, who I did in a nightclub for $750, their first play, or Pat Benatar for $500, or Cheap Trick for $1 a ticket, and they got 60% of the door. All these groups were nobodies once. The Beatles were nobodies. And when I was growing up in Chicago, they put out a few singles before I Want to Hold Your Hand and before She Loves You. And I was the guy who was going around touting the Beatles to other kids saying, you gotta hear this song.
You were the original Beatles promoter. They didn't even know it.
They didn't know it. They had never stepped foot in America. And I've told McCartney the story and he loved it.
You have every well-known rock and roll artist. I mean, from
Most of them.
Sting to Zappa to Pink Floyd.
Yeah, where's these are
The
Clapton.
Stones, Clapton.
Look at the opening act was and the ticket price.
Alice Cooper, our very own Alice Cooper. Oh my God.
Tickets $250. Nobody cared. My parents did. They staked me my first $5 grand or $6 grand in the early 70s, and I promptly lost that. But I stayed after it, and that's the key to anything, you know, is staying after it. You can't give up, and then you got to show up.
Arizona Highways Television is brought to you by Arizona Public Service and the Arizona Office of Tourism.
There's Calexico, there's the kind of the southern sound from Tucson. So there are other sounds, obviously, that are influenced by living here.
What we do is, I think, is pretty low key and low budge. It's always kind of been the do-it-yourself method.
Any musical influences, you know, your mentors?
I grew up really liking R.E.M. and the Smiths, a lot of the 80s rock. Of course, I love the 60s. But I gradually more and more got into the singer-songwriters. Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Tom Waits. Those are the stalwarts, and they're my favorite. I always loved music. I played jazz in our high school jazz band. I got to play at the Hollywood Bowl one year. At the end of the day, I also thought maybe I'd be an architect. I love structure, and I love the idea of putting things together and having a personality with places where people live. A lot of people know about the town of Calexico, and now, of course, there's a taco cart in New York called Calexico. There's even a boutique called Calexico Boutique in Australia. The name has gone out there, and we're just part of the Appreciation Society of Calexico. On the other side of the border is the town of Mexicali in Mexico. And so that duality and that kind of openness seemed to call to us back then in 1996. And together with the style of music we were making and the direction of a lot of our album covers by Victor Gastelum, it seemed a perfect fit. We love collaborating, and it's so much fun. As musicians, we're fans of so many different kinds of music, whether it be mariachi or techno, or singer-songwriters, or maybe someone that plays a unique instrument. It's just one way for us to kind of keep that excitement going, because if you do the same thing always at the same time, it's the same personnel, it gets a little old after a while.
Rock stars tend to have a larger-than-life persona, and the boss may have one of the biggest. But Bruce Springsteen owes some of his image to a celebrity portrait photographer who lives in Bisbee.
I always tell everyone I wish I'd left New York 5 years earlier. I was the old Chevy dealership, and it was falling down, the roof was collapsing. It still looks like Detroit out on the street, but New York City on the inside because we've redone this space. David Rose, like the flower. Kind of base here, I'm doing a lot more out of LA now. I used to do New York and LA, but I do go back every now and then for New York shoots, but it's mainly LA when I'm working. I was Bruce Springsteen's photographer for 10 years. I did a couple of his album covers and tours, and I shot a lot for Vanity Fair. I've had a long run with him over the years, everything from being in his living room, singing and dancing with Patty, to being in the recording studio or on stage with E Street. I did shoot a few more people other than Bruce. Yeah, the Rolling Stones on that tour, which always is kind of fun. Color fading a little bit over time, but Alice Cooper on my 18th birthday singing I'm 18. Bruce was huge because I did him for so long that it became very relaxed. You know, one of the hardest parts of celebrity portraiture is to get their trust, you know, to gain that. And it's getting harder and harder to do because you're getting less time with them. It used to be, you know, I assisted Annie Leibovitz back in the day, and you know, you would have 2 days with these people, and so there was time to break in and get going. And now it's like, okay, you've got 30 minutes, you know, and so it's pretty hard to get beyond, you know, hi, goodbye. You know? I used to have long hair. Like I said, Peter Frampton hair then and Peter Frampton hair now. So it's like Bruce and I back when we did the covers for Lucky Town and Human Touch. This was shot on Mandela's front porch in Cape Town, South Africa. And we did it for the 46664 African AIDS concerts. Yeah, I'll tell you one who I want to shoot now, I still alive, is Paul McCartney. You know, I photographed him live, but I've never sat down with him. So some of those legends like him and Dylan, I would really like to just hang out with and spend a few days and photograph. Because I really like people that inspire me to go out and do things for the world.
Arizona Highways Television is brought to you by Arizona Public Service and the Arizona Office of Tourism.
I think it's always been that way, where there's a music scene in a city.
Walmart brings all those memories back. It brings a lot of my friends that I haven't saw in years, which we all got a little older and a little smarter.
Back in the 90s, it seemed like there was 4 or 5 bands that would pull a crowd. Now, it just seems like it's so lush with talent.
Drawing on inspiration from the desert, musicians have long collaborated with our diverse landscape and culture to create styles and sounds that have helped define decades of musical genres.
That's very subjective. It's a hard thing to do. I mean, obviously it changes with the time.
As unique as our state, so is the musical talent that has carved out Arizona's sound.
And it's not just the sound of a city, it's a chorus of musical sounds that gives Arizona not one, but many voices.
It may be tough to define, but you'll know it when you hear it.
Marty Robbins grew up in Glendale, never made a record here. That's kind of the difference. Marty went to LA and then went to Nashville. But Marty Robbins, probably, if there was one artist that really became worldwide famous, it was Marty Robbins.